All right, welcome into Off the Bench, and I am back. It's been a while, it's been a minute, and I just want to say that all things that have happened from the last time I've been on this show to now have gone pretty well for your Cincinnati Reds. That's going to be the main topic of conversation today. We'll get into some headlines. We'll talk about the Bengals, where they're at, whether or not the season's cooked, if they're capable of maybe rallying behind Zac Taylor, or has Zac Taylor completely lost the team. But as always, many people obviously know me as a Reds fan, and they also know that my allegiances don't lie with the Cincinnati Bengals. But I'm going to try to shed at least what I think is some reasonable perspective on the Cincinnati Bengals as an outsider or somebody that doesn't maybe deal with the day-to-day grind, similar in nature to maybe what some other would perceive for the Cincinnati Reds when you have your head in it, when you can't see outside of just the curtains, right? You have the blinders on, as they say. Sometimes you lose perspective. Sometimes it's hard to make good, rational decisions or judgments on what you're looking at in front of you and whether it's true or not true. Cincinnati Reds, they have, let's face it, the most meaningful week of baseball that I have personally witnessed in maybe my adult life. I've kind of gone back and forth on this. Was I an adult? Technically, I guess I was by the letter of the law back when they were making their postseason appearances. Certainly in 2020, yes, COVID, they made the postseason, and I guess for all intents and purposes, I was an adult then, yes. And many would argue that I'm not an adult still, but that's not here. That's not the point. I guess the biggest decision that lies ahead is going to be the decision that's made tonight, and obviously Tito's already made that decision, and that was whether or not Hunter Greene was going to get moved up and skip basically a day that they were going to be able to throw a different starter, but allow Hunter Greene to move up and not only pitch tonight, but then would also be scheduled to pitch game 162. It's going to be a hotly debated topic one way or the other. There's no doubt about it, whether the Reds get in or whether the Reds don't get in. There would be people that have issues on both sides of the aisle. I'll leave it at this. Tito has gotten credit for certain things this year that maybe he shouldn't have gotten credit for. He's gotten blamed for things this year that maybe he shouldn't have gotten blamed for. There are many things that this Reds team has gone through, whether it be the offensive woes, whether it be the incredible starting pitching all year long, whether it be the inconsistency of what the game plan is, whether they're supposed to run the bases aggressively, whether they're not supposed to run the bases aggressively. This team has been feast or famine far too much this year. Now, whether or not you want to blame some of that on Tito and the managing style and the lineup card, or if you want to put that on the front office and say, well, he just doesn't have good enough players to be able to stick in there every single day, you do with that with what you wish. I am done debating those, I don't want to say minuscule topics, because they obviously are meaningful and impactful over the course of 162. But what's right here in front of us is the best opportunity as Reds fans that we've had in a long, long time. Before I go into the debate of maybe what they should have done or shouldn't have done, I guess I would also encourage folks to say, listen, if you have a chance to go to the ballpark, you should go to the ballpark. I think the Reds officially now have made each and every single night 3-2-1 nights. If that's the thing that it takes to get you over the hump, I got to tell you, it's a little disheartening, because if this is a baseball town, if we're going to sit here and continue to go, man, what a great baseball town Cincinnati is. And listen, I live in Cincinnati. I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan. I get the sentiment. We have Reds Fest. People love the Reds around here. I'm not here to say that there's no interest in all. But if we have to run gimmicky promotions to try to get people down to the ballpark when it's quite literally the most meaningful week in Reds baseball history over the last 10 years, I don't know how long it's been since you could arguably say whether or not this series or that series means more. I don't know. I get it's the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm not naive to that. But they're not going to help us fill the ballpark up. That's the thing, too, that I'd like to get out of the way. Let's face it. If you're facing the Cubs, if you're facing the Cardinals in a meaningful race right now, if you're facing, I would even venture to say, and I get maybe it's not fair to use the Yankees or the Red Sox or whoever else, they're going to help fill up the park. They're going to help fill up the park. How many times have you gone into Great American Ballpark and you've had to boo off the Let's Go Cubbies chants? And I get it. It's a major market. They have a lot of fans. But Pittsburgh Pirates are not going to help you fill the ballpark up. So it's all going to have to be Cincinnati Reds fans. And if we can't fill that park up for the next 3 days, I got to tell you, I know this is harsh. I know it might sound like I'm being over dramatic about it. I'm done calling it a baseball town. You will not hear me say that this town is a baseball town ever again until I see otherwise, if they're incapable of at least filling that park up. Now, that might be harsh. You might say, Trace, you can't tell people how to spend their money. You can tell people that, well, look at what they've done over the last 30 years. They haven't earned my trust. Okay. What did the Bengals do for the vast majority of their franchise history that makes you think that they deserve to sell out every single game? Let's face it, there's a supply and demand. I get it. The NFL, you only have how many ever home games a year? 9, somewhere in there, 8, 9, 10 games a year. Baseball's 81. I get it. There's a lot of opportunities to go down to the ballpark. But there's not that many opportunities to go down to the ballpark in the same sense that you have tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday. You don't. And you might not get it again. Unfortunately, that's how we feel around here in Cincinnati. You might not get it again for a long time. You have players going on social media begging fans to come out. You have Hunter Greene just last week that went out and threw a complete game shutout, almost had a no-hitter, and there was 25 people in the stands. And I completely understood at the time why there was 25 people in the stands. But he comes in the post game and he says, well, I wish there were some more people there. And everybody wanted to jump all over Hunter Greene's case. And you can sit there and say that, yeah, they haven't earned my ability to be able to go down to the ballpark. They've not done anything for me. I completely understand the idea of saying that, but they have now. They have now. This is the time. This is the present as we're talking here. I don't want to sit there and go back and say, well, 30 years this, 30 years that. Like, with all due respect, let's go through the entire roster right now. TJ Friedl had nothing to do with that. Will Benson had nothing to do with any of that. Spencer Steer had nothing to do with that. Matt McClain had nothing to do with that. Ellie De La Cruz had nothing to do with that. Noel V. Marte had nothing to do with that. Brady Singer, Trevino, Stevenson, they didn't have anything to do with the last 30 years. Gavin Lux is going on social media now asking for some help. Andrew Abbott's asking for some help. There's tickets for $8, $10 right now on every platform that you can find them on. And the Reds, the official Reds.com, I think is $8. So I get it. You can't tell people how to spend their money, but we can't sit here and act like we're this unbelievable baseball town, yet we're incapable of filling up a ballpark when we have an incredibly meaningful series. It's just, you can't do it. Be like saying it'd almost be like saying that if you're an unbelievable, world-class, world-renowned organization, yet you have 0 championships to your belt. Now, I know some people are going to be really, really upset with what I just said because I'm telling people how to spend their money, and that's not what I'm ultimately after. What I'm saying is I know damn well that people would be spending $200, $300, $400 to go to a whiteout Bengals game when they're 4-4 or 4-5 against the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football. I know damn well that if UC football was playing against some team to win the Big 12 championship, they would sell out that stadium. I don't know anything about the Cyclones, to be fair. Okay? You got me there. And to be honest, I don't know anything about FC Cincinnati. But I got to be honest, I've looked up how much the hell is real matches are on FC Cincinnati when I've tried to go down there in the past, and I got news for you. You can't get a ticket there either. But somehow, this baseball town, we've got to run out 3-2-1 nights for 3 nights in a row. We got to beg people to go down to the ballpark for $8 a ticket. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say I'm going to be incredibly disappointed to the extent to say that we don't deserve to have a good baseball team, because I'm not saying that we don't just because we don't have enough fans to go down to the stadium on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. but it's going to be really hard for me to defend moving forward and saying that we have a great, and a great is a lead. I'll still say we have a good fan base, but I'm never going. You can't continue to say you're a great or elite or one of the best when you have 70,000 people down at the banks for opening day. When, let's face it, on opening day, it's like 35 degrees sometimes, 45 degrees, 50 degrees, and it's a holiday around here, and we take so much pride in that, and I'm glad we do. But this is meaningful baseball. This is real, meaningful baseball the next 3 days. And you can go down to the ballpark for $10. I don't know. Obviously, we're not going to spend the whole show talking about it, but I will say that the optics of this are not going to look good if we're incapable of being able to go down to the ballpark, period, point blank. Tito Francona has decided, obviously, not to pitch Hunter Greene tonight, which leaves Stone some opportunities to debate. One is going to be, obviously, if the Reds do not make the postseason and Hunter Greene leaves the regular season with a complete game shutout, and then he only has one more opportunity to pitch because of the decision, and he faces Paul Skeens. Paul Skeens, certainly, with the offensive lineup that the Reds put out sometimes, could shut them out. Possibly. Not saying it's likely, but it's possible. So no matter what Hunter Greene does, unless he throws another shutout, then I guess ultimately it would be for naught. Some would say a waste. You find yourself at the end of the year where you only needed to win one extra game and you decided to sit Hunter Greene, what would be basically one extra start, and there will be 100% speculation on whether that was a good decision or a bad decision. On the opposite side, you could also say that you don't really want to try to force your hand. If you're Tito Francona, everything seems to be going well right now. Let's not try to rock the boat. Let's not try to make it feel like we're desperate. I think that may be the one thing that I think Tito's leaning on perhaps more than anything in this decision is that I don't think he wants to try to make it feel like it's anything other than another regular season game. I think he wants to try to make it feel like it's just the ordinary. And the reality is that it's not going to be that. These Reds players know damn well what's in front of them. The Mets players have known for a month what's in front of them, and yet they've continued to stumble because they can't get out of their own way. Biggest question of the day is going to be whether or not the Reds get in or they don't get in based off of what this decision was, good or bad. And that's the damning part about all of it, because in hindsight, everything looks perfect, as we all know. And the truth is that Tito's decision and whatever he decides to do here is going to look like a genius calculation, or it's going to look like one that everyone's going to say, well, no, duh, you should have done X. If game 162 comes around and you already have it clinched, of course, you can just move Hunter Greene off that final day against the Brewers. He decides not to pitch, and he pitches game 1 of the wild card round, which, for all intents and purposes, will be in Los Angeles. Now, my decision would have been to move him up, personally. I know that I get the downside of on Chatterbox Reds the other night, Nick Kirby brought up an excellent point. One is that he threw 9 shutout innings, a complete game, his last start, over 100 pitches. Wasn't incredibly taxing because of just the adrenaline, but you never know how that can wear off maybe a couple days down the line. It might need, Hunter Greene might need that extra day off to kind of get him back into a spot where he feels good, ready to go. And that's the one thing that none of us truly do know. And you can always hide behind that at the end of the year and just say, well, you don't know the health of these guys, because that's the one thing that you can never really blame a manager for, right? You can never blame him for the decisions that he makes from a bullpen perspective on a nightly basis, because you just don't know how well guys are feeling, and you could always just stand or hide behind that. Stone, I lean on the idea of moving Hunter Greene up. I haven't asked you yet where you stand on this, but I'm interested to know. Welcome into the show. I think, like, who knows, 13 minutes in, I've monologued for basically like what seems like an hour at this point. You starting him tonight, or are you letting him just pitch on regular rest, if you want to call it that?
I'm good with this decision from Tito. I think there's a couple of reasons why. One, he's got all the injury history. We know that. We want him to be out there, and we want him to obviously be healthy and be able to be available in the postseason if it comes to that. and I don't want to mess with him too much, right? He's clearly in a rhythm. Things are clearly going all right. I'm fine with him sticking in this spot. And also, it'd be one thing if you had some bum that was going to go out there and throw game 162, but it's Brady Singer. And you could argue these past couple of months, I mean, he has been absolutely nails for this team. He's obviously going to throw today, and then if the Reds need to win game 162, he can be available to go that game there as well. And also, not to look too far ahead, right? But if you're in that Dodgers series and you don't have Hunter Greene, do you even really have a chance to win that series, to be honest? So I'm all right with this decision there from Tito. I don't want to mess with him too much. Again, if you didn't have confidence with other guys in the back of this rotation or the middle of this rotation, maybe you don't make that decision. Clearly, Tito has confidence in those guys, and I think he should have confidence in a guy like Brady Singer. And also, something I don't think a ton of people are talking about, the Pirates kind of have been protecting Paul Skeens a little bit of late. He hasn't been throwing a ton of innings in his recent starts for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So if you can just
similar to the same thing that happens when you bring in a reliever in the 7th inning of a baseball game. Nobody talks about the 7th inning decision of whether or not you should have brought in the reliever or not to be able to get the guy out with 2 outs with the guys in scoring position. And if they get him out with guys in scoring position, guess what? Nobody really ever brings it up again. Ho-hum, glad he got the guy out. But you know what? If he gives up a double that gives up the lead, then all of a sudden it was the worst decision ever. You should have left the starter in and or the relief pitcher that was in before. Let's face it, the Reds, they have not wavered off of who they are all year. And that's the thing that maybe is the most not only concerning thing, but also I would say the most enticing thing, because they found a way to win in the manner in which they have looked ugly all season. And a little poetically, I guess, when you pin it up against the opposite team in town in the Cincinnati Bengals, they kind of both, in a way, are styled to win fights in a completely different manner, right? Cincinnati Reds are an ugly team. They don't have too many bells and whistles. I guess if you want to say the starting pitching is pretty, but most times people do not go to the ballpark to watch good starting pitching. They go to the ballpark to watch home runs, to watch doubles, to get excited when the fireworks go off, when the ball goes over the fence. That's what the vast majority of fans would consider to be an entertaining game. Yeah, I know there's some baseball purists out there that are going to say, oh, I love a good pitcher's duel. Give me that 1-0 game or give me that 2-1 game. The reality is the vast majority of fans don't feel that way. If you can think back of all of the best memories you have of going to Reds games, it more or less probably centered around somebody hitting a big home run, or the night that they played the Braves where they came all the way back and they went 11-10. Those are the standout games. Sure, you can sit there and say the no-hitters of maybe guys like Homer Bailey, or maybe you want to say Hunter Greene just the other night. That's fine. You can say that. But very rarely is anyone going to leave a 1-0 or 2-1 game and been like, that was riveting, that was awesome. And that's the way that this Reds team's won all year long, which makes me think that's kind of why the narrative around this team maybe is the way that it is. But it doesn't mean they're not good. It doesn't mean they're not capable of winning that way moving forward. The truth is that they just win ugly more times than not. Now, the question is, can you do that in the playoffs? I don't really know, and I don't care. That's the one thing that everybody kind of keeps pushing back on, perhaps, is that you can't. There's no way you're going to beat the Dodgers 1-0 or 2-1. I don't know, but I know one thing. I'm happy to find out. I'm okay with that. And I know maybe that's a loser's mentality, but the truth is I just want to get to the postseason. However you get there, you get there. And the truth is, in baseball, in a 3-game set, it's so ridiculous. I mean, it's so ridiculous that you have the Dodgers, who obviously have invested the amount of money they have invested to try to have a good baseball team, that get to the postseason. And I get, if you win your division, right? You win your division to a certain extent. Maybe you don't have to worry about this, or you have one of the better records in the league. You certainly don't have to worry about this. But a 3-game set against almost anyone in the league, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the odds are significantly better for the team that you would consider not as good. And the A's just took the Reds to the woodshed, folks, in Sacramento. Absolutely. Not just a sweep, but an absolute pounding. And you turn that right around, and what do the Reds do? They take care of Chicago in a 4-game series. It's such a, I don't want to say a coin flip, because I don't think that's totally fair. But this notion of worrying about what happens after the season ends, if you were to make the postseason, for me, is just nonsense. And secondarily to that, I would go back to the fact that the Reds are capable of winning ugly games, and that's who they are. And when I was going to say the opposite version of the Cincinnati Bengals, the unfortunate part is that team's built around a lot of scoring. It's built around players that you would consider to be exciting type of players. Right? When you talk about the Cincinnati Reds, I mean, it sounds insane to say, but some of their MVPs of this team are guys like Tony Santillan. Not a guy you're going to fly a poster of down at Great American Ballpark. Not somebody that you're going to tell your kids to go get their jersey. Let's face it that the Cincinnati Bengals' best players, or the players that everybody's going to talk about, are going to be high-profile players, national stars. And that's fine and dandy. But what I am going to say is that when you ultimately look at both of the ways in which those teams can win, the Cincinnati Reds are the least sexiest option you could possibly ever have. And when you go into this series, that's the way in which I think that they can hopefully find a way to win this one. We talk about the Reds, how they're going to do it down the stretch, Stone. The truth is that they're going to have to continue to win in the manner in which they will, which is going to be starting pitching and the pitching staff gives up 3 runs or less, and they're going to have to find a way to scratch and claw and get 4 runs or more if they're capable of doing that on a nightly basis. We've seen this past week where they scored 2 runs or less 3 times in 6 days, yet they won 2 of them. So it's not something that you feel, I guess, in a weird way that you can continue to replicate, but they've been able to do it. You face Pittsburgh. It feels like this game tonight, in my opinion, is the game that's going to set the table for the rest of the season. Now, maybe I'm just saying that. Some are going to say that I'm over. I have kind of like I'm a prisoner of the moment. But I just feel like psychologically, you've seen what happened to the Mets. You can't convince me that sports doesn't have momentum. I know that there's some analytical folks. I know that there's some people that sit there and they punch on the keyboard and they'll tell you that, well, that's just big numbers playing out. They might have a little bit of a lull, but then boom, they'll come roaring back. I don't see that sometimes. At the beginning of this month, the New York Mets had a 95% chance to make the postseason. They have a $300+ million payroll. You can't possibly convince me that that's happen chance, that they just suddenly didn't play well. There's pressure in New York, coupled by the idea of not playing good baseball for a short amount of time, that starts to get in the minds of the players, and then it snowballs. And right now it feels like the opposite is true for the Cincinnati Reds. And tonight, if they're capable of winning, I feel like they're going to find themselves in a position where they think that they're going to be able to do it. If they were to lose tonight, I think that there could be, Stone, some doubt that creeps into the minds of whether or not they're going to be able to get through what has been a pesky Pirates franchise. I don't even want to say team, because this isn't just a team that we've been dealing with. This is a multi-year deal with the Pirates. Are the Pirates good? No. Am I hesitantly to saying no? Yes, because they're obviously good enough to take care of the Reds, yes. But at the same time, the A's and the Pirates, there's something about this team. They play down to their competition. The next 3 days, if they don't do that, Stone, and they take care of this series, I think they go to the postseason, because I think the Mets continue to collapse.
Yeah, I totally agree. Obviously, the number one thing here is the starting pitching, and that's why, we feel optimistic right now, especially if you can even just find a way to get in. It's like, well, you got this starting pitching, right? Yeah, it's this Dodger team that's unbelievable, and they have this great lineup, and they pay all these guys all this money. But in the postseason, and let's just be honest right now, the Reds are in the postseason right now, and they've been in the postseason for the past month. And if they have those pitchers that can go out there and play at the level in which they've been playing, they're going to be all right. But at the end of the day, with this Reds team, how things have transpired this season here to this point, it wouldn't shock me, and I know it wouldn't shock you at all either, if you lose all 3 games to Pittsburgh here in this series. It's just kind of, you've had some incredible ups this year and you've had some incredible downs, and it's just a matter of what team's going to show out tonight. Is it going to be the team that plays down to the level of competition, or is it going to be a team that comes out with a fire in their belly and a confidence that, hey, right now we're in the postseason, we're telling everybody to fill up the ballpark, we're going to come out, we're going to pitch well, and we're going to continue to hit well like they've hit decently the past few games. Obviously 2-1-0 victories, I get that. But overall, the bats have woken up a little bit from where it was a month ago. So it's just all about what team shows up and what team it ultimately takes the field tonight for Tito Francona, because we've seen some good teams and we've seen some really bad teams. What version of the Red Legs are we going to get in this series is the question.
Well, I think the biggest question is what kind of offensive production are you going to get? Because ultimately, in my opinion, that's been the difference over the past, call it, handful of weeks, is that you've gotten incredible production from some players that weren't up to this point having great years. Spencer Steer carried this offense for what was basically a series, if not longer. Over the last 30 days, Spencer Steer has been by far the Reds' best hitter. That's not been the case all year long. That's almost the way in which this team has to win. They got to find one or two guys on a nightly basis that can kind of carry the load. I don't think, and I know that this is going to sound harsh, they're not a good enough offensive team to pass the baton. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen consistently. They don't have enough good hitters. They don't have it. But what they do have is some hitters that have potential to run into some baseballs or get hot over a short period of time. Ellie's one of them. Steer's obviously one of them. Matt McLain's turned it around a little bit here as of late. You obviously have Marte, who's had a good year. Stevenson hits the biggest home run that I think of his career. I know that Nick Kirby thinks that maybe the home run he hit when nobody was at the baseball stadium against, I think maybe it was the Pirates. I don't know, remember who it was. The walk-off home run the year, as I said, in COVID. I disagree. I think when you have a full ballpark and you have what is quite literally right in front of you an opportunity to make the postseason, that's the biggest swing of Stevenson's career. And then from there, you have just a hodgepodge of guys, in my opinion, that can kind of help a little bit, but they're not going to carry the load. TJ Friedel certainly is a fringe type of guy I would want to maybe put in that mix. Andujar has been very, very good, yes. But they don't have collectively as a unit a good enough lineup makeup to rely on them night in and night out. It's just not going to happen. So you're going to have somebody get hot like Spencer Steer's gotten hot. And that's really been the difference. That's been the difference. And whether or not you want to try to convince yourself that they've figured something out or that they're a better offensive team than they were before, they're not. They're not. But what they have gotten is elite starting pitching all year long, and I've continued to say that. Like, it's almost as if we've downplayed how good the starting pitching has been just because we've obviously been upset by the record, by the missed opportunities, by the chances that they had to make a run and they were incapable of doing it. And yes, we always point the finger mostly at the offense. Pagan blew some saves earlier in the summer that everybody got upset about. Yes, but consistently over the course of the season, the only reason this team didn't win 75 games is because the starting pitching and the bullpen has been unbelievably good. And by unbelievably good, I'd go so far to say, and I know that there's going to be some people that might say, well, statistically, it's the best starting pitching and bullpen that I've seen while I've watched as an adult. Period. Not even close. In fact, I would tell you this. If the offense was just as good as the starting pitching, they'd be the World Series favorites. That's how good they are. But we're not. We're 4 games over 500. We're scrapping for the third wild card. I'll say that one more time, just to kind of paint the picture here. If the offense was as good as the starting pitching and the bullpen, they would be the World Series favorites. Yet, we're fighting for the third wild card spot. So don't convince yourself, don't confuse how we've gotten ourselves to this point. The offense has been abysmal for the vast majority of this season. Have they turned it around a little bit to make it competitive? Sure. Yeah, I'll give you that. But the question is ultimately going to be who can step up? Because it's going to be 1, 2, maybe 3 guys that are going to get hot. It's not going to be a collective effort. And I hope I'm wrong. You can come back and say I'm wrong. I've been wrong on this team before. I'll happily admit that. I've had them dead and gone 3, 4, 5, 6 times. It wasn't that long ago where they stranded the bases loaded with nobody out in the 9th inning against the New York Mets on a day in which you felt like they had to have the game, and they stranded the bases loaded, and they lose the game by a run. Yet we find ourselves in a spot here talking about how they control their own destiny. Now, sure, admittedly, I did not see that the Mets completely falling apart, but I'm not going to apologize for that. And I don't think that the Reds should be kind of like downplayed for what they've done because of the Mets' collapse. They've taken advantage of it. And now the question ultimately is are they capable of taking advantage of the Pittsburgh Pirates? Because that is going to be, in my opinion, the defining moment. Everyone's going to sit here and talk about what happens in Milwaukee. The Cubs are going to win some games here. They are. Mark my words. The Cubs are going to win some games against the Mets. At least one. At least one. Dare I say 2, and heaven forbid 3. I think there's a chance that if the Reds take care of business against the Pirates, they take 2 or 3. I think they go up to Milwaukee and they have to win 1 game to get themselves in a pretty damn good spot. If they win 2 in Milwaukee, I'd almost guarantee it. But if you win the series against Pittsburgh, it sets up very, very, very nicely. It also gives Tito a lot of options in Milwaukee with the ability to try to go all in on a game with a bullpen game, right? You go up 4 or 5 runs in the second game in Milwaukee, you can just absolutely pour everybody out there that you trust from a bullpen perspective, go and win the game, take care of the series, take care of the fact that you make the postseason. But you don't get that opportunity unless you take care of the Pirates, which leads me back to the same thing I've said at the start of the show. It is by far the most important series that I think I've watched as from a regular season perspective as a Reds fan as an adult. And I could even say maybe my life, because as a kid, I don't remember the glory days. I was too young to understand what 1995 was all about. You know, the last thing I can remember as a kid of having excitement for the Cincinnati Reds was Greg Vaughn in the basically the 1-game playoff where Al Leiter shoved and we lost. So now we find ourselves with a chance to maybe break the Mets' hearts, and I don't know. I'm excited about it. I hope you are too. And as I said one last time, people are going to sit there and say that I get it. If you can't afford it, you don't have the time, you can't find a way to get down to the ballpark, that's reasonable. It's understandable. But it's not just one person. Let's face it. There's, a million and a half that surround Cincinnati that could possibly go to this baseball game tonight? And we need to fill up, 30,000? Seems reasonable. Seems reasonable for a baseball town. And if you don't think so, that's fine. We don't. I'm not going to make this a hill I die on. I'm just telling you that's the rationalization that I have when I sit here and call this a great baseball town or not. Because I can think through all the different cities that I would consider a good baseball town, and I'd ask myself, would they fill this stadium up? Probably. I would even say St. Louis Cardinals fans would probably fill it up if they were playing in Cincinnati tonight, and it's not even their home stadium. And I get people are going to say, well, have you seen St. Louis' stadium right now? Yep, I have. I absolutely have. I 100% have. But I can't just downplay what they have obviously been over the last decade as well. Now, to be fair, they've not gone through hell and high water like we have either, to be fair. So maybe you have a point with that. Stone, Tito's obviously made the decision. We've gotten through that. They play the Pirates tonight in one of the biggest games all year. Your biggest takeaway from the Reds as we move forward here?
They just haven't quit. Cowboys said it on the radio a couple of weeks ago about them just being cockroaches, and they don't die. It's kind of like a boxer, right? They're kind of getting peppered in the face, and they just find a way to get back to the corner and live another round. And that's something that they've done a tremendous job of, and they should deserve a lot of credit for that as well. I think me personally, and I've said this before on the show, coming into the season, my expectation was this. It's either a successful season if you make the playoffs, and it's a failure if you don't. And now you're in a situation where, in my opinion, you can set yourself up to have a successful season if you get in. I don't even really care what happens in LA if you get to that point. Yeah, obviously we'll be rooting for them, and hopefully they can find a way to magically win that series if it comes. But if you find a way to get into the playoffs in Tito's first year with all the youth that you have on this team, with all the adversity that you have faced, how many times did we think they were dead in the water? How many times did they break our hearts with their lack of offense? Countless times. And if they can find a way to overcome all of that, have a winning record, and get into the postseason, that is a tremendously successful season and a reason to be optimistic about years going forward, especially with the rotation that you have in place. But my question for you is this. We talk about the offense, right? How it's let this team down throughout the entirety of the year, but some guys are heating up. Spencer Steer, obviously, I've always viewed him as a guy that's had that clutch gene, right? He's kind of hovered around, 230, 240.
It's a real thing, too.
Yeah.
Clutch gene's a real thing.
Yeah. and he, has hovered. I think you would like him to be, more 260, 270. And he's kind of just, he's gotten out a bunch, but he shows up in big moments. He's got some pop in his bat as well. Stevenson, you touched on, he's coming around. Ellie, we know he can break out. Finally put one over the fence the other night. By the way, since the H series, they finally have the ability to put the ball over the fence, but I don't know if those are mishits or what, but we can skip over that for now. Sal Stewart, he's getting in the lineup a little bit more. He's provided them a spark. And Will Benson, Tito's finally opened up his eyes that Will Benson can really help this team actually win games. So my question is this: what do you expect the offense to do in this series against Pittsburgh? Are they going to show up and do enough for them to win these games?
Well, I'd have to see the lineup first. I know in the chat they're trying to ask when the lineup card comes out. It's usually, 3-4 hours before the game. We'll find out, obviously, what the lineup looks like. The lineup card, no matter what they do, Stone, I think is going to be ridiculed no matter what. Because realistically speaking, you have a couple guys that are going to be what I would say fringe kind of starting lineup type players or not, that also carry traits that you could argue on both sides of the aisle why you'd want to put them in there. I'll tell you this. In a sold-out crowd with the bases loaded, with less than 2 outs, would you rather have Gavin Lux up there or Sal Stewart? At this very moment, I don't know, to be honest with you. But I do know who Tito's gonna want to have up there, and that is 100% Gavin Lux. And the truth is that right now, Spencer Steer is a guy that you can't take out of the lineup. And for heaven forbid, I'll tell you this right now: if they decide to put Spencer Steer out in left field, the amount of disservice that they've done to this kid is absolutely ridiculous. If they try to stick him out in left field because they need his bat in the lineup, but they don't want to sit Sal or Andujar, I can't. I'm quite literally going to lose my mind. Spencer Steer has to play first base. Okay, he just does. That's where he's been all year long. He's been playing very, very well. I don't want to touch that. I don't want to mess with that. And I hope that Spencer Steer continues to play the way that he has been playing as of late. Because if he does do that, this team's completely different. As I've said all year long, if this team had a very good DH, a guy that can absolutely rake, and they have a first baseman that could absolutely rake, it helps this offense go. It's a tremendous boost to this team. Yet the problem all year long has been the DH and the first base have been absent for the most part from an offensive production standpoint. So we find ourselves now in a spot where's Sal Stewart play? You going to play him at third base over Cabrian Hayes, I think he's the second highest WAR player since he's come over. Not only is Cabrian Hayes an unbelievable defender, he's been pretty serviceable at the plate. Do I think that he should be hitting, up at the top of the lineup? Of course not. He is still a liability when he comes to an offensive talent, but the reality is that he's one of the better players in this team, in my opinion, on a night-in, night-out basis. So he plays third base. Spencer Steer plays first base. You have a spot now where Will Benson, again, unless there's a left-hander throwing, you can't not have Will Benson in the lineup. First of all, Will Benson's underrated significantly when it comes to defensive capabilities in the outfield. I don't know why it's taken this long for people to realize that Will Benson can track a ball down, has the ability to get pretty damn good reads and make great plays. He's done that, in my opinion, for a considerable amount of time in this city, yet I don't think he gets that credit. So if we're going to talk about defense, if Nick Krall is going to come out and say, well, defense and pitching is the way we're going to move forward here at the trade deadline based off the moves he made, and then they stick Spencer Steer in left field for a couple of innings in a meaningful game, yet we don't play Will Benson for the vast majority of the year, none of that really added up. It was like we got one word on the way we're supposed to win here, and then the way that Tito went about managing this team was the opposite. So where does Sal Stewart play? Because I think that's ultimately, in my opinion, going to be the debated topic. Is Sal Stewart sitting again? He's got 4 home runs and 40-some-odd at-bats. I agree. But who do you sit? If you have a right-hander going, are you really going to sit Gavin Lux? Gavin Lux was the guy that got the big hit that gave them the one run that they had in the previous game that allowed them to win 1-0. Gavin Lux is a guy that's played in World Series games. Gavin Lux is the guy that they thought so highly of that they sent over Sirota, who's a guy that I think that they valued. They sent him over to get Gavin Lux in a trade. So it's not like it's not like Gavin Lux has ever even been considered a bench player for this team. I don't know. Andujar has to hit against left-handed pitching, I would think, Stone. I mean, he's one of the best left-handed hitters in the entire league. And he's also been he's been very good for the Reds. It's not like he's not been very productive either. So the truth is that there's just, in my opinion right now, there's not a very clear path for Sal Stewart to get in the lineup. There's just not. And we can sit here and act like that's ridiculous that you called up a prospect and you're incapable of playing him. I thought Tito said that you didn't really call him up if he's not going to play every day. Maybe he misspoke, because the truth is that hasn't happened. And let's also be clear. It's not because Sal Stewart has absolutely been terrible as to why that he doesn't deserve a chance to play. It's just that right now I can understand or justify the moves Tito is making to not put Sal Stewart in the lineup. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to maybe try my hand at him over a guy like Gavin Lux. But I'll be honest, Stone, there's a trust factor that Tito has in certain guys on this team. And I know it's going to sound funny, and it's truly not a bit. But at one time, Santiago Espinal was that trust player. I don't know why. I can't give you a good explanation as to why you would continue to hit Santiago Espinal second in the lineup and play a position every single day the way that he did earlier in this year. I can't explain it, and neither probably can you. But Tito obviously has this faith and trust in certain guys, and he has shown that Santiago Espinal was that. And you know who that is right now to me? It's Gavin Lux. That's who it is. Gavin Lux is going to be in the lineup if there's a right-handed pitcher throwing. I would be shocked if he's not. And I am also very concerned, if I'm being completely honest, that they're going to stick Gavin Lux out in left field again. I would hope not. Because if I'm going to fall on one side of the aisle or not in this whole debate of what they should or shouldn't do, I am going to fall on the side of defense. I'd much rather have, and it sounds crazy to say, even against left-handed pitching, I would even rather have Will Benson out there at times, depending on the situation in the game, just because of defense. There's just no way in the world that you can tell me that they're going to play the most meaningful baseball for the next week of my adult life with Gavin Lux and or Spencer Steer in left field and Noel V. Marte in right. Our corner outfield spots are filled with two guys that have no business playing the outfield. And yes, Noel V. has done an unbelievable job in right field, and I think he's gotten considerably better. But all it takes is one moment, and that whole thing comes crashing down. We can act like it doesn't matter right now, but you know what's going to matter? If there's a guy on first and second base, they hit a screaming line drive out to right field. It's a 1-0 baseball game in the 8th inning, and all of a sudden we misplay a ball in left or we misplay a ball in right, and all of a sudden now it matters. I'm telling you before the lineup card comes out, it matters that we have outfielders playing the outfield. So, the lineup card, I guess, that'll come out around 1 o'clock. No matter what they do, Stone, I can guarantee you one thing. There will be people complaining. Hopefully I just walk through the reason and the rationale as to why I think that it's going to be the way it's going to be. But do you have a strong-willed opinion, I guess, if anything, on Sal Stewart or any of these other guys, really, that you think should find a way in the lineup?
Yeah, it's a great question. You can go back and forth. I don't feel strongly one way or another. That's why Tito's in this spot to make these decisions. But at the end of the day, I want championship-caliber players in the lineup. All right, they clearly have belief in Sal Stewart. He's a young kid. He clearly has a very high ceiling in terms of what he is able to do on the baseball field. I would make the argument that if they didn't call up Sal Stewart, they would not be in this spot right now. Sal Stewart clearly has helped them win ball games, but there's only so many spots in the lineup, as you alluded to, right? You got 3 righties on the bump for Pittsburgh in this series. Obviously, that is a big deal. Are you in a spot with Andujar? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what does he do exactly against righties? Is he a guy where it's like, well, we don't want him at all against a righty, and if a lefty's in, obviously you want him in there? I think you hit the nail on the head with Benson and his defense. I think you'll see Tito put Benson in the lineup more in this series. I think he's kind of warmed up to that a little bit. But I think with Gavin Lux, is the guy that you want in the lineup. You got him from the Dodgers. He has this postseason success. We're playing playoff games right now. I know I keep saying that. But, there's different ways that Tito obviously could go with this, and he's going to get picked apart for whatever he does. But as long as Spencer Steer is in the lineup, he needs to be in the lineup regardless of who's on the mound. I think we all understand that. Ellie's obviously going to always be in the lineup there as well. But there's different decisions that he's going to have to make, and we'll see exactly what he does. But I think we'll all be very disappointed if somehow Benson, with all these righties, is not in the lineup. He deserves to be in the lineup. He's proven that he's capable of helping this team win, and he better be in the lineup, quite frankly.
Well, it comes down to what are they going to do with Lux and or Sal Stewart today. Both guys have not faced I don't know how to say this guy's name, so my apologies, but Oviedo from the Pirates. He's obviously a right-handed pitcher. Benson only has 2 at-bats, but he does have a hit against him. Nobody has a home run against him, but really throughout the scattered lineup, there's not a whole lot of folks that have faced him, period. So Hayes is maybe the guy that sticks out the most. That's another guy, Ke'Bryan Hayes I'm talking about, that 100% will be in the lineup. He's not only is he a former Pirate, which I don't know if that matters to anybody or anything like that, but it does seem like maybe you play your best against your former team type situations. But he has 4 at-bats with 3 hits against Oviedo. So I don't know exactly what this lineup's going to look like, but the truth is that somebody's going to have to be left out that we're going to probably think they should be in the lineup. Stevenson's another guy. He's got 1 hit. Steers got. They have a lot of guys that have hit him relatively well. Outside of the guys that have not faced him, Andujar has not faced him. Lux has not faced him. Marte has not faced him, and Sal Stewart has not faced him. So there's kind of like I just said, the 3 guys are. I would say Andujar, right? Andujar, Lux, and Sal Stewart are probably like the 3 guys that you can't pick all 3. They're going to have to make a choice on somebody, and the question is none of them have any experience with the guy that is starting tonight. In regards to Andujar against right-hand pitching, there was a time, Stone, during this season where the offense was so bad, as soon as they got Andujar, he started hitting left-handed pitching really, really well. And you know what they did? They said, the hell with it. We're going to stick him in the DH no matter what. And he hit the ball relatively well. Now, again, I don't know what his splits are over the course of his career. I'm sure I could dig that up. But the truth is that, he's a guy that can run into the baseball and hit one over the fence. Even if he goes 0 for 4 in his first 4 at-bats, the 5th at-bat has a chance to hit one out. The truth is that Gavin Lux doesn't really have that. Gavin Lux is a guy that maybe puts the ball in play more, per se, but I'm not going to probably run into a baseball to hit one over the fence. Now, that goes back, and I don't want to do this today, the age-old debate here at the Cincinnati Reds of how they should go about winning, whether they play small ball and they try to pass the baton or they hit the ball over the fence. I know one thing that has been proven to be true is that when this offense is playing well enough to keep them winning games, they usually accidentally hit the ball over the fence. Now, I have not really got on the airways and shared a whole lot about that quote that came out of Sal Stewart's mouth. I will tell you this. That is very much just a baseball type of saying. I know that people might not agree with that. I don't think that he's saying home runs are bad. But the truth is that when you grow up and you play baseball, one of your first fundamental ideas when you're trying to hit is to hit the ball hard right back through the middle. That is the fundamental idea. You want to hit line drives. It's maybe the same type of concept with any other sport about the foundational principles of what makes a good player, right? Hitting line drives is the concept and the thought of what pretty much all good hitters do, maybe up until you get to a certain point, right? Josh Donaldson, I don't know if you remember him, but he was the first guy that kind of openly came out and said launch angles matter, swinging for the fences matter, and he had an unbelievable season in regards to hitting home runs, and he became a very, very valuable player at that point in his career. So that kind of started to change the mindset, if you want to call it that, of what good hitting looks like or what offensive production actually looks like. Do you value batting average over guys that can hit the ball over the fence, OPS, et cetera, et cetera? I'm not going to get in the weeds of all that. But what Sal Stewart was saying is true, right? Home runs are mishits from the perception of a hitter. Doesn't mean that they don't want them. Doesn't mean they're not trying to do that. But they're quite literally just trying to hit the ball hard right back through the middle on a line. And if they accidentally miss it by a millimeter low, guess what? It's probably a home run. I get the quote. It's the same type of concept with Barry Larkin, right? Like the home run rally killing quote from Barry. Home runs are rally killers. It's easy to run with. It's easy to say it's like the most absurd take of the world, and it does sound like that on an actual quote. But I don't think it's as black and white as that. I don't think Sal Stewart's quote that he said was all that ridiculous. It's one of those things where, yeah, I get the heightened senses that we have in Cincinnati about, not being able to hit home runs and it leading to us having completely abysmal offensive performances and in our front office, in our I guess call it the coaching staff and Tito at the helm of that, always talking about small ball and getting guys over and getting them in. That becomes pretty nauseating. I agree. 100%. I'd love to have guys that can just hit the ball over the fence. I think we all would. But the truth is those guys cost a lot of money. And I think the reality is the Reds realized at some point this year, or even in the offseason, I think they realized they don't have a lot of guys that can hit the ball over the fence. And, yeah, I know there's going to be some people that say, well, they do have some guys that can hit the ball over the fence. They just decide not to play them. And you know what? I got to put my hand up and say I get it. I understand. That's part of the frustration. Yeah, no doubt about it. Guys like Will Benson and Reese Hines and CES, they don't get much of a chance while you watch, guys that don't hit home runs struggle as well and get seemingly endless chances. Gavin Lux hasn't been good at times this year. Santiago Espinal was very, very bad for long periods at this time. Obviously, Matt McLean struggled, but Matt McLean played a premium position and played good defense, so it's kind of hard to compare him to some of the others. The reality is this. We are who we are, like it or not. I'm done fighting that fight. You can be done with it too, or you can continue to say, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. We don't have this guy, we don't have that guy. We need to get somebody in here that can hit home runs. Get Reese Hines up here. That's fine, you can do all those things. You're just going to get frustrated, pessimistic, beat up like I was for about a month. It was frustrating not seeing anybody in the lineup that could hit the ball over the fence. I got to tell you, it was tiring. But I've come around to the idea that, you know what? The only way this team's going to win is one way. It's the only way they know how to win. Go out there and shove. Give up 3 runs or less. Have somebody in your offensive lineup that gets hot. Whether that be Spencer Steer, whether that be Ellie, maybe TJ Friedel has a game where he hits 2 home runs. That's what it's going to take. You're not going to get 10, 12, 13 hits from this baseball team. Very rarely, if ever. And I say if ever is knowing that they've done it before, by the way. So we'll see. That's who they are. And that's what they're going to have to be moving forward. Is it good enough to win in the postseason? That's a debate for another day. I don't really give a damn, as I've said before. Stone, it's a 3-game series against the Dodgers if they're capable of getting in. And at that point, maybe it's a loser's mentality by me. But it's almost like, just get me into the dance. I don't care if it's almost like we're on the bubble here for the NCAA tournament. I'm not going to get greedy and be like, well, are we going to be able to win on the West Coast if we have to play UNLV or whoever else out there with their style of play? No, I'm not worried about that. I'll worry about that when I get there. But that's who this team is, Stone. And I hope people have come to realize that, no matter who they put in the lineup, there's going to be flaws because that's what this team is.
I want to get your opinion on this, kind of put you on the spot here. If you're making the lineup today,
yep,
you kind of broke down, what we think Tito might do, what he's done in the past, the pros and cons, all the guys. Technically not a must-win game, obviously, but for me, you need to win tonight, right? You're playing Pittsburgh, you're coming home, you're telling everybody to show up to the ballpark. Singer's been great, he's on the bump. Feels like you need to win tonight. What is the lineup that you are rolling out there against a right-handed starting pitcher?
My lineup would look significantly different than probably the one that they would put out. But TJ Friedel's a guy that's been in the leadoff spot all year long, so I'm just going to leave him there just because of familiarity. I will say this about Tito that I really do appreciate him doing. Is I do think that he always tries to make everything feel like it's a pretty smooth ship. There's not any crazy wholesale changes. He left Ellie De La Cruz in the 3-hole for how long? He left Espinal and McLean in the 2-hole for how long? Too long. Way too long. So I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm not going to try to put ourselves in a spot where we feel like, okay, probably don't want to do that. But I would put, personally, number 1, TJ Friedel. Obviously, he's playing center field. Here on the spot, I'm gonna probably need your help to make sure I can remember who the hell I have in the lineup or who I don't. I would say tonight against right-handed pitcher, I would personally go with Sal Stewart, but he's not. He's going to go with Gavin Lux. So that's going to be your DH. Gavin Lux is going to be in the 2-hole. I don't know if Hayes is healthy. That's $1 million question. Is Austin Hayes healthy? Because if he is, he's hitting, in my opinion, he's hitting third. If it's not, Hayes hitting third, it'll be Spencer Steer. So there's your left fielder. If for whatever reason Hayes isn't healthy, Will Benson has to be there, right? That's a good debate. Is Will Benson going to go in there over Hayes regardless? I don't know. One would argue that you should, but I don't foresee that. I just don't foresee that happening. Then you have Marte playing right field. All right. You have Stevenson catching. You have Ellie De La Cruz playing shortstop. You have Cabrian Hayes playing third base. Did I already say Spencer Steer in the 3 or 4 hole?
Yep.
So there's your lineup. You're asking me what I would do. I would personally play Will Benson.
Yeah.
I like the vibe he puts off. I like the idea that if he gets on base, he can steal. I like the idea that he can run balls down in left field way better than Hayes can. I know Hayes has kind of maybe been a little bit of a better bat, but has he? Like, I don't know. Has he? Over the last 30 days, I know he probably hasn't. But I'm just saying in general. Like, do you really think that Austin Hayes is such a better hitter than Will Benson? I don't.
I don't either.
I don't. There's the ceiling of what Hayes has in the outfield versus Benson has in the outfield is considerably different, in my opinion. Considerably different. There was a play in the 8th inning where you had Steer in left field, right, and TJ Friedl in center field, and there was a fly ball and a left center field that landed. It landed on the warning track and bounced up against the wall. It has, like, those balls have to get caught in meaningful moments. Now, I guess you could sit here and say I don't know for sure if Will Benson would have caught it, but I have a pretty damn good feeling that Will Benson catches that ball. So, again, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong for saying that. Maybe Austin Hayes deserves the opportunity to play left field if he's healthy. I don't. I think Will Benson deserves every Will Benson has broken the door down to get more opportunities, in my opinion. The guy has gotten 0 chances, what seems like, all year long. And every single time that he's got a chance, he's had a major moment at some point in a pretty quick fashion. He came up here, and he came from AAA. He was the NL Player of the Week. He was the NL Player of the Week, I believe, for a week. Then he comes out, and against the Rockies, I might add, we were on the brink of getting swept, okay, by the Colorado Rockies at home. And Will Benson lines a baseball off the top of the fence. And the one thing that somehow, some way we want to talk about is because he didn't run the bases hard enough. Yeah, I get it. He thought he hit the ball over the fence. As the kids say, he pimped the home run a little too long. But you know what? He still got the third base stone. Spencer Steer the very next day did this, like the same week, did the same thing. Yet, again, Spencer Steer's been awesome. This isn't about Spencer Steer. It's about Tito's view or perception of certain things that happen in certain games for some players, but the opposite for the other. Spencer Steer that same week did the exact same thing. Didn't cost the team because he still got the second base. I don't care, by the way. This isn't about Spencer Steer. They're good enough players at this point to know what's right and wrong. But Tito made a big point about how, I guarantee you that Benson never does that again. And then he got gulagged. He didn't play for like 2 months, dude. Didn't play for like 2 months. And it wasn't because the offense was unbelievable. It was just because, I guess, he wasn't good enough to play. Then all of a sudden, I think Friedl gets hurt, or he doesn't get hurt. He goes on paternity leave, right? Will Benson gets an opportunity to play center field. Plays an awesome center field, by the way. Like, dare I say, maybe even better than TJ Friedl played it. And then all of a sudden he kind of goes back and he gets some opportunities, comes back and forth. The next thing you know, boom, here he comes again, and he's providing spark, providing energy, and the Reds have won games. Now I know that there's a crazy stat out there right now that when Will Benson plays in a game, their record is just insanely good. Now I don't want to keep using that, Stone, as like my well, look at that. That's a little disingenuous. I think we can all agree that if you just say, hey, look at their record when this guy has been in a game, that's not totally fair, obviously. But I would think there's some merit in that. But that's why, for my sake, I already heard Tito's press conference a couple of days ago saying that he really hopes Austin Hayes can get healthy. I get it. Another guy he trusts, just like Gavin Lux. He's a guy he trusts. Why he trusts him more than the others, I don't know. I really don't know. But he does. So you can pretty much book it that Will Benson and Sal Stewart probably are not going to be in the lineup. That's my guess.
And Benson's got that spunk about him, too, that just gives you life and it gives you energy. And I think that's something this team could certainly use in this series against Pittsburgh, right? We're talking about, people showing up to the ballpark. You're going to have most eyes that you've had in quite some time on the Cincinnati Reds, right? I think there was a lot of people that were back in for the Cubs series, but there's going to be a level to this fan base that wasn't tapped in for the past couple of weeks, and now they're going to be back tonight for this game. And you just need that energy. You need that confidence, borderline cockiness. And that's something that Will Benson brings. And I just think his approach at the plate is better than Austin Hayes'. I mean, there's so many times where Hayes is at the plate and you're like, he's got no approach. He's just swinging at everything, and you're questioning what is he even trying to do up there at the plate right now. So it's interesting. I think Marte's got to be a lock out in the outfield. At some point, he's done a fine job defensively, but at some point, is he going to make that critical mistake, as you alluded to, that kind of ruins everything, right, as it relates to him playing in the outfield? That certainly could be a possibility of something that happens, but I think Benson's got to be in the lineup against a righty, right? It's not a lefty on the bump, it's a righty. I would put him in.
We'll see. My betting odds tonight are Will Benson will I don't know. I don't say he won't be, but I have a feeling that he won't be if Hayes is healthy. If Austin Hayes is healthy, I don't think that Will Benson will be in the lineup. I hope I'm completely wrong. In fact, I would even be I'd be optimistic to say that Will Benson will be the DH and Gavin Lux perhaps will be the guy not in the lineup. But again, yet I keep going back to this. It seems like Gavin Lux has taken over the Santiago Espinal role of who Tito trusts, and I'm not going to fight that fight. So obviously I've made it up to my hour here on Off the Bench. I just want to say one last thing here before I send it over to Stone. The Cincinnati Bengals are 2-1. They're 2-1. I get it. It looked terrible on Sunday. But if we're going to sit here and claim that a win is a win, then a loss is a loss. I understand the idea that it doesn't look good on the peripherals. I understand that you're going to say that you don't have your franchise quarterback. I understand that you're going to say that your offensive line can't block. They certainly can't run block, and you have no run game at all. Understood. Defense is still suspect. All those things can be true. But the reality is you're 2-1. This is the NFL too. Browns just beat the Packers. As a Packer fan, am I really worried about it? No, not really, because that's part of it. You go into hostile environments in the NFL, sometimes it just doesn't go well. Bengals stole one in Cleveland. They found a way to steal one. Guess my question would be, and I know that the perception isn't always the reality, but my question would be that if you went and somehow you didn't win that game, which you shouldn't have won, by the way. That same kicker that missed all the extra points and the field goals just banged a 55-yarder to win the game this past Sunday in Cleveland. So if you lose game one against Cleveland, and now if somehow you found a way to reel back and you win the next two, how are you feeling as Cincinnati Bengals fans? Of course, you're going to tell me that you feel a lot better because actually Browning's the one that won the game. But was Burrow in the offense the reason that you won the first game in the first place? No, it wasn't. So I get the pessimism. I understand that the Zac Taylor rumors now are absolutely swirling, and I'm not here to defend Zac Taylor by any stretch of the imagination, but I will say that when you're up 41-3 or whatever the hell the score was, and it looks like guys are quitting on him, yeah, because I think we can all agree that you don't want Jamar Chase out there trying to chip block for a guy to get an extra 2 yards, okay? Do you want that? I certainly wouldn't. Am I saying that you should quit ever in professional sports? No, not totally, but I'm not sitting here saying that you should go 100% out of your way to try to put yourself in harm's way when you're trying to do something that we all know is relatively meaningless. The game was far gone out of reach. Yeah, some of the players may have quit. And maybe you're going to say that you have a problem with that. If you're a hard-nosed type of person, I get the concept of that. We're very much of a blue-collar community around here. Take your lunch pail, you go into work early. I get the concept. But I'm also going to say that the Bears bounced back, and they also won after looking abysmal the week before. The Packers look like the Super Bowl champions, everybody said, after 2 weeks. They go into Cleveland, they get beat. It's the NFL. It's the NFL. You just got to tread water. Maybe, perhaps you can say that your team's not good enough from an offensive line perspective to be able to kind of hold water out of the boat so it doesn't sink. I would just say this. If you're incapable of playing competitive football in the NFL, no offense to Joe Burrow, I know he's unbelievably good, then you have no chance of ever winning anything meaningful in this city if that's what you have right now. If you're going to tell me that you can't tread water for at least a couple months with the team that you currently have, you never had a roster, you never had a chance in the first place of getting there. And I don't personally feel like it's dead. Maybe I'll be wrong. But you can't convince me that the 2-1 Bengals are dead. There's just no way you can look at it that way. Now, understood. They don't have their franchise quarterback. All right, you win that argument. But are the Baltimore Ravens cooked? Are they a terrible team? They're 1-2. It's just funny to me how the best team in the NFL is 1-2, and what some are saying the worst team in the NFL is 2-1. It just doesn't work for me. All right, we'll be back here. Obviously, Stone Shield Show is next. I appreciate everybody being in here. Doing my best here as we try to do Chatterbox Reds at night, some off the bench in the morning, and then who knows, like probably 4 different kids' activities for your boy here tonight. So hopefully I'll find a way to be able to watch all the things I need to watch and do another sports talk show tomorrow. But again, much love. Appreciate everybody. I will try to be back here better than ever tomorrow to talk about hopefully what is a massive Reds win. Chatterbox Reds tonight. Stone Shield Show next. Take care, everybody.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show here on a Tuesday. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here this morning. Trace Fowler made his appearance back on Off the Bench. Spent a lot of time talking about the Cincinnati Reds, as we should, right here in this city of Cincinnati. You know, as we talked about yesterday on the show, obviously when you're in late September in this town, it's always, oh, the Cincinnati Bengals, what are the Bengals doing? Oh, the Bengals just got blown out. What are we going to do about the Bengals? Not the case here this year, as the Cincinnati Reds are in a spot where they control their own destiny and can ultimately make the MLB playoffs, which certainly is very, very exciting. Big game tonight against the Pittsburgh Pirates. We'll talk a little bit about that here on today's show. And Brady Singer takes the mound. Still don't have a lineup, obviously, after 11 o'clock here in Cincinnati. We'll have a lineup probably around 1 o'clock, maybe a little bit earlier than that. But obviously that is very, very exciting for the Cincinnati Reds. We'll spend some time talking about that. Also have some Bengals conversation here on today's show. Did the Bengals quit on Zac Taylor? Certainly seemed like they did. I've got some more Bengals thoughts. Obviously spent a lot of time talking about the Bengals yesterday, and we'll always spend time here on the show talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Also, Week 4 power rankings in the National Football League. Had the Packers at number 1 last week. Obviously, that is going to change after their loss against the Cleveland Browns 13-10 on the road. The Giants, what a mess they were on Sunday Night Football, 22-9. They lose to the Chiefs. It's been pretty ugly for Brian Daboll and company offensively, specifically for the New York Giants, and it might just be time to move to Jackson Dart. Also, the Baltimore Ravens, a team that I had as a lock to win this division, and certainly, obviously, then a playoff lock and a team that could do damage in the playoffs. They have a 1-2 record, and they have 2 games where that defense has been really, really bad. I get it. 2 really good opponents. The Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions have another formidable opponent this coming weekend in the Kansas City Chiefs. But the Bengals, yeah, it was ugly, but 2-1. They're tied atop that division with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we'll spend some time talking about that if we have time to close out today's show. Do want to give some condolences to Rudy Johnson's family. Obviously, Rudy Johnson, of course, a legendary running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. He has passed away. Cause of death unknown at this time, but certainly condolences to his family. What a great player he was, right? I was born in 2000, and when I think about my early days as a Bengals fan, the first player that I think about actually is Rudy Johnson at that running back spot. I actually had a Rudy Johnson jersey growing up as a kid. I believe he was the running back here from like 01 to 06, and I think 05 is like my earliest memories. I would have been 5 years old then at that point of the Cincinnati Bengals. So very sad day in the Bengals community as it relates to Rudy Johnson. Incredible player, and was always great off the field there as well. Again, cause of death unknown at this time. It's certainly condolences to his family, and all he did as a Cincinnati Bengal. Again, had the jersey, just the way that he played. Right, those Bengals teams there, especially early in his career, were terrible, but they always feel like they had some juice when they gave him the ball out of the backfield as the running back for the Bengals. So certainly thinking about Rudy Johnson here on a Tuesday. But let's also spend some more time talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, right? We spent a long time talking about Cincinnati yesterday on the show, obviously on the heels of that disappointing loss. Disappointing doesn't even begin to describe the loss that they suffered at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings on the road in Minneapolis. Obviously, hit that subscribe button, by the way, if you have not done so already. YouTube.com/Chatterbox Sports got you covered, your one-stop shop for the best Cincinnati sports coverage. Off the bench, 10 to 11, typically Reed Mouse, Trace Fowler. Those are our two guys there on that show right now. Reed and Trace do a tremendous job, and then my show, obviously, 11 to noon. After that, we've got content all day long, live shows at night. We'll have a pregame show for the Reds tonight, and we'll have, obviously, a postgame with Nick Kirby, Trace Fowler, ninth inning, and beyond, hopefully talking about a Cincinnati Reds win. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do that right here, right now, and we'll have videos that go out on the channel throughout the day, clips from our show there as well. That, too, is pretty exciting. The podcast, of course, that'll be up pretty shortly after we wrap up here at my show. Both an Off the Bench and the Stone Shield Show podcast will go out in case you missed any of the show. But let's start with injuries. Zac Taylor, of course, always addresses the media immediately following the ball game, and then he does it again the day after the ball game on a Monday with a typical Sunday game. He had some interesting things to say. We'll start with some injury updates. CTB, obviously, had the hammy. He did not play last week for Cincinnati against the Minnesota Vikings, and it kind of showed on the football field, right? CTB was really, really bad week 1 against Cleveland. I thought he was really, really good week 2 against Jacksonville. Has the hammy, doesn't play, and the Bengals, I think, certainly missed him as Josh Newton he had some good moments, but he also got exposed from time to time in that ball game there as well. No update on whether or not he could perhaps suit up on Monday night against the Broncos. Obviously, an extra day with the Monday night game certainly beneficial, and maybe he will be able to work his way back. Shamar Stewart, right? Obviously, Bengals rookie, had all the drama this offseason with the contract. Played the first 2 games, showed lots of flashes, I thought, and it looked like he was a guy that could, be Trey Hendrickson's replacement, or obviously this year complement Trey Hendrickson and do good things out on the football field. He didn't play against Minnesota, still has the ankle, his status up in the air. It's very much a week-by-week basis as it relates to Shamar Stewart. In his place, thought Osai played solid, right? I'll be the first to admit, I've been a guy that's always been very critical and hard on Joseph Osai. He showed up in some big moments in the game against Minnesota. Not very many people did, but he had a sack in that game, so that was positive. That's like the one thing that you can take away from that game that was a little bit positive was, okay, you were able to get some pass rush on Carson Wentz. You saw it with Chris Jenkins. You saw it a little bit with Osai. Myles Murphy had arguably his best game of his career. So, that was like the one positive from Cincinnati's performance against Minnesota. We will see if Shamar Stewart could be available on Monday night. That would be big to get him back. Make absolutely no mistake about it. Dalton Reisner, Zach said, is a high calf issue. And Reisner, when he talked to the media, he said he didn't have any concerns about playing Monday night against Denver. Zac Taylor had a little bit of a different approach, saying we'll work through the week and make our decisions. So that, to me, implies that there is a real world where they could go with Jalen Rivers at that guard spot instead of Dalton Reisner there at that right guard spot. Obviously, the offensive line's been horrible. They can't run the ball. They haven't been able to pass protect. Just a complete disaster as it relates to the offensive line. We'll see exactly who they go with in the game, because I think it seems like Dalton Reiser's going to be fine to go, but do they want to make the move to the rookie? You saw that in the second half. Again, it was partially an injury decision. Partially, I think they were like, well, we're getting whipped. Let's see what we have here in the rookie. Interested to hear. I think that's probably one of the biggest storylines, certainly from a personnel perspective, going into the game on Monday night, what they're going to do at that guard spot if they turn to Jalen Rivers. Lucas Patrick obviously still on IR. He cannot come back and play that spot. Samaje Perine, he had an MRI on that thumb. It came back clean. Good chance he still plays against Denver. Denver, of course, a former team of Samaje Perine. When he left Cincinnati, that is where he went, and they didn't really integrate him in what they were doing offensively. But he's got to hold on to the football, obviously. Even if he is out there, I thought he ran the ball better than Chase Brown. But nobody ran the football well, all right, against Minnesota this past weekend. I think the reason you saw him get some more carries was, he's a bigger guy, right? Maybe he can have an opportunity to run through some of those tackles they were right there on the line of scrimmage. But Chase Brown's RB1 of this team. He's a really good running back in this league. Unfortunately, this year he hasn't been able to prove it just because of the ineptitude of what Cincinnati has on the offense line and from a play calling perspective as well, which we'll get into that as we progress through today's show. But there's a chance Perine could go. He's got to hold on to football, right? Should have 2 fumbles really this year, or does, but was able to hold on to that first one. If you remember against Jacksonville on the kickoff where he just kind of, alligator armed it, bounced off his chest and started rolling 10, 15 yards in front of him, and luckily he was able to pounce on it. But if he's not able to land on that football, I don't even know if you can feel confident about even putting him out there on the field, because that would obviously be 2 fumbles. The one he had, obviously, against Minnesota, just trying to run the clock out. Inexcusable to put the ball on the ground there in that situation. Noah Fant, concussion. Obviously, he's got to get through protocol if he's going to be available on Monday. An extra day of rest, so that's certainly beneficial for him. He, of course, had a fumble as well in the football game, but Noah Fant, his status up in the air. The long week does help him. Again, former team, Denver Broncos, I'm sure he'd be fired up to go play on that game on Monday night. He's still up in the air with that concussion here at this point. So that's kind of injuries to this point. I'm sure more people will pop up on the injury report when they get going here with practice later today, or tomorrow. You got, Logan Wilson. He's battling through some stuff. I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the injury report there as well. Marcus Mims has been battling through some stuff there as well on the offensive line for Cincinnati. So I'm sure more will pop up as the week progresses, but that kind of covers it there from an injury perspective. Bengals open as 7.5-point underdogs against the Denver Broncos. In the NFL, it's a really, really big spread, right? On the road, primetime game, 7.5. We'll see. I haven't checked today what it's at, if that has moved at all, but feels about right considering what Cincinnati has done to this point in the season. And, it's a really good Denver defense, and the Bengals have looked inept on offense with Jake Browning. Bengals have, though, some good news, beaten Denver 3 out of the last 4 times that they have matched up against each other. But, I've always been... People view me as a Zac Taylor apologist. I still think Zac Taylor is a good coach, and I think that he's the right person to lead this team. But, I'm going to be honest here on today's show. Looks bad for Zac Taylor right now when you watch the Minnesota game back. Even worse than when you watch it live. And obviously, that was horrible there as well. One thing that Zac Taylor could always hang his hat on throughout his time here in Cincinnati is his teams never quit on him, right? Regardless of the spot they were in, they would continue to fight till the end and continue to respond, even if they had dropped a couple of games in a row or even if they were facing a big deficit. You never saw them quit. Over the first time in the Zac Taylor era, I saw them quit on the road against the Minnesota Vikings. He took the podium yesterday, and one of the things that stood out to me is he said he liked the way that they responded in the second half. And that really had me scratching my head because I don't know what he saw in the second half, but I certainly did not see it. The first 2 plays were runs, right? They get stuffed on the first play, and then it's a second and long run. And when you're getting blown out like that, I hate second and long runs to begin with, right? To be honest with you, If it's second, especially with this offense where they're at, like, you got to throw the football on second and long to put yourself in a situation where it's third manageable, right? They didn't do that for Jake Browning at all. It was all third and long all day. If you run the ball on second and long and you can't run the football, next thing you know, it's 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11. And against that Brian Flores defense with a backup quarterback and a suspect at best offensive line, you're flat out cooked. And that's just the reality of the situation. So they go 3 and out and they punt, and then the defense goes out there, gives up 10 plays and another touchdown. All right, so I didn't see them respond whatsoever. So I think that was just flat out false from Zac Taylor when he said, we really went out there and responded well in the second half. I remember during the game when he was talking to Tracy Wolfson going into half, said, we still have a lot of pride. We still have a lot to play for. We got to get things cleaned up. And then after the game, he was like, I'm happy with what we did after half. I don't see how you could possibly be happy with what Cincinnati did there in that spot. And another thing that stood out to me is this. And it was watching the Detroit-Baltimore game last night. And we've always talked about, even with Joe Burrow as the quarterback, why things always look so hard for Cincinnati offensively. So reliant on Joe Burrow making an incredible play and overcoming, right? Even the throws. Like, there's never anything easy. It's always like, it's closely contested catches or, just having to fight through and get extra yards. You just don't see things come easy for this offense, even when things are clicking and they're playing well. It's all reliant on Joe Burrow being absurdly good at playing quarterback and rising above all the turmoil that, seemingly this team puts him in. If you watched the Detroit-Baltimore game last night, how about when they go for it, Detroit, on the goal line there of Baltimore, if you watch the game where basically they handed it off to Amon-Ra St. Brown in the backfield, and then they had kind of an option play there with Gibbs coming out of the backfield with him, and they pitched it to him. Easy walk-in touchdown. Just brilliance. And it reminded me of a Ben Johnson play, really. He was obviously known for kind of that gadgety stuff when he was calling the plays for Detroit. He obviously is gone, new offense coordinator for the Lions, but that felt like a Ben Johnson play where it's just great creativity and great scheme from an offense. When have we seen Zac Taylor do something like that? Never, right? They're not running the football, right? We all get that. It's not working, but what are they doing? They're just continuing to do the same stuff. Yeah, we'll get under center, we'll turn around, we'll hand the football off, or maybe we'll toss it to them, right? But there's nothing creative with their offense. You got to try to do some creative stuff when things aren't working for you. You have to switch some things up. There was a poll a couple of weeks ago where people around the league, coaches, executives were polled like who are the best play callers in the National Football League, the top 3 guys. And nobody voted for Zac Taylor. Zac Taylor didn't get a single vote. Obviously, the guys at the top of the list are, McVay and Andy Reid and Ben Johnson, guys like that. And I'm not saying Zac Taylor needs to be in that kind of category. He doesn't need to be at that great level of play caller, but he's got to be better. And I hate when people sit there and just non-football people like me that just sit there and talk about it and just bang on the play calling. That's usually a pet peeve of mine because these coaches, they know a lot more than we do. But from the lack of creativity in the run game where it's like, okay, you're not generating any holes up front, but you're just going to continue to turn around and hand the football off and hope something changes. Like, no, there's got to be something that you shift with your offensive philosophy if you want to be able to overcome those things and eventually have more success in the run game. I get it. It's only week 3, but beyond that first half in Cleveland, it has been dreadful. That's a whole second half of football against the Cleveland Browns. That's a whole 60 minutes of football against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then a whole 30 minutes there against Minnesota at half. You have to show something different. You got to be like, all right, there's something that we're going to spice up to try to have some success here on the ground. And it was the same old, and they had no success. So I need to see more creativity out of Zac Taylor. He has to be able to overcome too, right? He doesn't have Joe Burrow out there anymore. He has to show some of his brilliance, right? Lots of people would say, he doesn't have any. I disagree. I think there's some in there that he can really be somebody that can help elevate this team from a play-calling perspective. But it can't just be, we got to, find a way for these same guys to create holes for us in the run game. They're clearly not doing that. That's not going to change. All right, there's nothing that Scott Peters can do that can change that drastically where you're going to have success running the football with the 5 offensive linemen that you have right there. And if you go with Jalen Rivers again over Dalton Reisner, that's not going to have major effects there as well because that's what you had in the second half against Minnesota, and clearly that didn't work either. All right, you need some brilliance from your play caller and your head coach to create some creative things Scheme it up. Find ways to get guys in space, get guys open. We never see that with the Cincinnati Bengals offense in the run game or the passing game. It always looks so hard. How often when you watch Green Bay, they got guys running free. Maybe that's a bad example because what transpired in Cleveland, but typically LaFleur's got guys free all over the football field, and it's easy stuff for the quarterback, right? Creative stuff in the run game. The Dolphins have been a disaster, but McDaniel over the past couple of years, maybe not this year, they've had great success on the ground with guys like Raheem Mostert, right? Maybe we need to see more motions, right, for the Cincinnati Bengals and not just, oh, we're going to turn around and hand you the ball and hope you can find some space to maneuver. Another takeaway that I got from the game watching it back was just how unprepared this team was to go in there and play Minnesota, right? And that's a direct reflection on the head coach when you come in and you are unprepared. It looked like Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores knew exactly what Cincinnati was going to do, right? If Cincinnati was going to run something, Minnesota knew what they were going to do, and then if Cincinnati was going to check out of that, Minnesota had the answers for that as well. Now, there's not many people in the National Football League, not many staffs in the league, besides maybe what they got in Kansas City, that's going to come into Minneapolis and outcoach Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. Those two guys are at the top of their game. They're really good, all right? But it shouldn't have been that drastic of a coaching mismatch in this game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Cincinnati Bengals. And that's exactly what it was. It was very evident that it was a coaching mismatch in this game, all right? When you get blown out like that. Again, I'm the biggest Zac Taylor guy you'll find online. But when you get blown out like that, that is a direct reflection of your head coach and not having them prepared. Clearly, the things that Minnesota was doing defensively, the exotic pressures, they weren't ready for it. And also something that shows me that they weren't prepared is this. Carson Wentz, you can say what you want about Carson Wentz's career to this point. Obviously, had a good couple of years in Philadelphia, had that MVP-like season there. They win the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. A lot of credit there goes to Carson Wentz for that. He's been a journeyman since then. Chiefs last year, Commanders at one point. He's bounced around a lot. One thing Carson Wentz does really well is he gets rid of the football quickly. And something that Cincinnati should have done in this game was find ways to make him hold on to the football and try to take shots down the football field. Even with one of the best receivers in the National Football League in Justin Jefferson, Carson Wentz, a backup quarterback, has struggled pushing the ball down the football field a lot throughout his career. They should have made them beat the Bengals defense deep and trusted their cornerbacks. Now, those cornerbacks, they've given you reason not to be trusted, but if you're going to give Wentz an opportunity to get rid of the ball quickly, and they did, he's going to pick you apart. And that's kind of what he did. Was Wentz sensational in this game? No, but he took what the defense gave him, and for the most part, he got the ball out of his hands quickly. And when he didn't, you sacked him, right? But there was too many easy completions. Should have forced him to push the ball down the football field more. Again, shows me they weren't prepared. They were less prepared than the Minnesota Vikings were, and ultimately, that is what resulted in this game being so ugly for Cincinnati. So Zac Taylor's got to respond in a big way for the Bengals on Monday night. We're going to find out a lot about Zac Taylor and his control of this team on Monday night. Because I've said multiple times, especially after another Joe Burrow injury, Zac Taylor's safe. And I still think that. But there's only one thing that can make him not safe, and it's that his team quits on him again. All right, and you would hope that they would never quit on him again because you would hope that they're never in a spot where they're getting blown out as bad as they were in Minneapolis. But that can't happen. If the effort for professional athletes that are getting paid millions of dollars is something that becomes a question, that's a real issue. Still think Zac Taylor is going to be just fine. Still think this Bengals team is going to find a way to win some games this year. Is it going to be the playoffs? I don't know. Unlikely at this point. All right? But he's got to find a way to make sure his team is competitive throughout the entirety of a football game and doesn't quit regardless of the score. Didn't have that. Again, he's been able to hang his hat on that his whole career, right? This isn't something like, oh, with a Zac Taylor team, they'll quit on him, right? If that were the case, he'd be gone. It's not the case. This is the first time he's been here since 2019. They were awful that first year with Andy Dalton. They won 1 or 2 games that year. They didn't quit on him all year. They kept playing. They kept fighting. That showed me a lot. And ever since that moment in 2019, they've continued to do that. But for the first time ever, I look at that team and I say they quit. They quit on their head coach. And on top of that, their head coach didn't have them in a spot where they were prepared to go win the game. Now, Zac Taylor shouldered a lot of this blame. Zac Taylor's a man, right? He would never, he's like, bring it on. I get it. It's on me. And he has the right approach there in that regard. And I respect the hell out of Zac Taylor for doing that. But he's got to be in a spot with his team where they don't do that again. And we'll see. Tough opponent. On Monday, Denver Broncos, tough opponent. Monday Night Football, prime time, lights are on, island game, right? That's always dangerous for a head coach, right, that has some noise around him. You put him on an island with no other games going on Monday night, could be subject to a lot of criticism. We'll see how this team responds against Denver. Typically, teams in the NFL, after they get blown out, they respond, they compete hard the next week. And they should. And there's also reason to be positive because, as Trace alluded to on Off the Bench, you are what your record is. And we said that last year when the Bengals were like, it feels like they're a lot better. They're great offensively, but their record stinks. Well, this year, it feels like they stink, but they have a 2-1 record. And, oh, by the way, Baltimore, we'll talk about them later in the show, is 1-2. They're great offensively. I still think they'll be fine. Lamar Jackson's brilliant, but they're giving up points. Derrick Henry's turning the football over. Who would have thought that how the Bengals have played through 3 weeks, they're in a better spot than Baltimore? I get it. Baltimore's had a gauntlet basically to this point. Yeah, they played Cleveland last week, but having to play Buffalo, having to play Detroit, and they got Kansas City next week. That's difficult for the Baltimore Ravens. But still, you're tied atop the division. It could be a heck of a lot worse. And because of that, I think you're going to see the team respond well. I think they understand that the whole season for them is very much in front of them at this point. By no means a lost cause at this point for the Cincinnati Bengals. But we'll see. All right. Moving on now to some of my power rankings here. We're going to get this trusty graphic going once again. That's Casey McAllister did a great job of this. And we're going to break down my top 10 teams in the NFL. We do have a change at the top. Had Green Bay last week. They obviously go into Cleveland and lose. We'll talk about them. They're still in my top 10, obviously, but rough game for them. We do have a couple of teams, one team that we'll talk about right off the bat here, making their debut in my power rankings. But here we go. Without further ado, let's get it going. My power rankings in the NFL, top 10 teams going into Week 4. All right, coming in at the number 10 spot and making their debut this year, I have, Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts. How about that? At some point, you have to give credit where credit is due. And the fact that Indianapolis is 3-0 at this point, I get it. They haven't, played world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. But what Daniel Jones has done is absolutely incredible. He looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League. Through 3 weeks, he is a serious MVP candidate. Now, is that going to continue? No, I don't think it will. But you got to give him credit where credit is due. They are top of the AFC South, and they certainly belong in this list. And I tell you what, Lou Anarumo, that guy's probably a pretty happy camper here at this point. Of course, longtime defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. He gets fired. He lands in Indianapolis. That defense is flying around making plays. They've always had pieces on defense, and candidly, they've always had pieces on their team with a solid coaching staff and a solid guy in charge in Shane Steichen. And Chris Ballard, their GM, has put them in a good spot to have a lot of talent on the field. The position that they could not get right since Andrew Luck has been the quarterback position. Not going to sit here and say they finally got it right, but Daniel Jones is playing darn good football, and he deserves some credit for it. Got the Indianapolis Colts at number 10. Coming in at number 9, they have a losing record, another kind of heartbreaking loss for the Ravens last night on Monday Night Football. They're 1-2, but they still belong on this list. If you're the Baltimore Ravens, you have to have some concerns defensively, right? You're giving up chunk yardage. You're giving up big plays. The run that Montgomery had last night just absolutely gashed your defense. When you think of Baltimore, you always think tough, physical, AFC North style football. Right now, they just look like kind of the Bengals from last year, to be completely honest with you, as it relates to the Baltimore Ravens. I think they'll be just fine. They were my pick to win the AFC North before this season, and I think they still will ultimately find a way to win the AFC North, but they don't look nearly as complete of a football team as last year, turning over the football left and right. That is troublesome for them as well, but the Ravens still survive in my power rankings and are number 9 despite a losing record. How about the San Francisco 49ers? They had some struggles last year. Missing the postseason was a down year for them. I think people kind of are forgetting a little bit about Kyle Shanahan and what he can do. In my opinion, Shanahan is still a top 3 head coach in the National Football League. I put him up there with Andy Reid and Sean McVay. We'll get to McVay in a moment. But what they've done with the backup quarterback, again, Mac Jones, who we talk about, Jake Browning being, one of the best, if not the best backups. Mac Jones, I think, is probably the best backup. Maybe you say Kirk Cousins, that's fine. Mac Jones, I think, has proven these past 2 weeks that he deserves another chance to be a starter in this league, could perhaps be a bridge guy. He's done a tremendous job of running Shanahan's system without Brock Purdy. Certainly wasn't very pretty against Arizona, but they find a way to get it done. San Francisco, I view them as a team that's going to make the playoffs, and they can make some noise. People have stopped talking about them because they had 2 opportunities in the Super Bowl, and they weren't able to get it done. They're getting old. They're getting brittle. They're banged up. Brock Purdy's not as good as what his contract would indicate. San Francisco is a really good football team. They're going to be a problem if they can stay relatively healthy as time progresses. Have them at 3-0 at the number 8 spots in my rankings. Number 7, the Los Angeles Rams. I've been bullish on the Rams all offseason and even through the first couple of weeks as well. Massive lead on the road in Philadelphia. I believe they're up, 26-7 in that football game. Obviously, one of the best bets of the week was Rams plus 3.5. Looked like that was a lock for much of the game, and then they collapsed. Got to give credit to Philadelphia. All right, people writing off Jalen Hurts, saying, it's just a team that can only run the football. Jalen Hurts was pretty spectacular in that football game, by the way, against a really, really good Rams defense. Jalen Hurts proved he's one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League. We'll talk about Philadelphia in a little bit. I still think Los Angeles is probably better than number 7, but based off blowing a lead like that, I get they had to travel cross country, play in a tough environment there, an early game, right? They're a West Coast team, obviously, playing a 1 o'clock game. That is never an easy thing. But the Rams, I still think they have a ton of talent, still think they're going to be a problem at the end of the year and in the playoffs, but they collapsed regardless of how good their opponent was. They collapsed. Should have won that game, had an opportunity to kick the game-winning field goal. Obviously, gets blocked, returned for a touchdown. Rams will be just fine, but they needed to slip after last week's performance. People after week 1 wanted to write off the Detroit Lions and say, the Lions, no Ben Johnson, no Aaron Glenn. They're in serious trouble. Well, the Lions have looked really, really good these past 2 weeks. Dan Campbell has done a tremendous job, and Jared Goff proves that when he has ample time in the pocket, he's really, really good, and he'll pick you apart. Now, if he is under pressure and you kind of get him off his mark, it can be really, really bad, right? He's one of the most immobile quarterbacks in the league that is a really, really good quarterback. You don't see that kind of style of quarterback anymore in the National Football League, right? All these guys are good athletes. They can move around, what have you. Certainly not what Jared Goff is. But when you give him time, he's got a rocket for an arm, and he'll pick you apart. He was tremendous in the game against Baltimore last night. Got to give a lot of credit to Dan Campbell. Really impressed with what they were able to do these past 2 weeks. Also on the road, primetime Baltimore, tough place to play. They get it done. They're in at number 6. Coming in at number 5 here on this list is the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, I had the Packers at 1 last week, and then the upset of the weekend, they go into Cleveland and fall 13-10. And I'm really high on Jordan Love. I'm going to continue to be really high on Jordan Love, but he has a couple of those plays where they're just head scratchers. And that's what you got. They're up 10-0 deep in your own territory. He throws it, and he throws a pick. Just puts the Browns right back in that game. I think there was only 5 minutes left. And that's just not something you can do if you're going to be a serious Super Bowl team and a team that's viewed as the best team in the National Football League. You can't make those kind of mistakes. Looked like they were going to kick the game-winning field goal. It gets blocked. Joe Flacco gets into field goal range. And obviously the kid that missed it against Cincinnati and missed all types of kicks that game was able to come through big, make a 55-yarder, and Cleveland steals a game at home against the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay will be just fine, but there was some dialogue around the team. Guys saying, let's run the table. That's not a conversation you can have at 2-0, right? That's just something that can't happen. LaFleur talked about that after the game, was frustrated about it there as well. You can't have those types of conversations. If you're 10-0, yeah, maybe you can throw that around a little bit, but 2-0, saying you want to go undefeated, that is ridiculous, and they immediately get beat by a team with a really good defense and a really solid head coach in Stefanski, and they slipped down to number 5. They'll be just fine. That defense for Cleveland is good, but obviously can't be at the top anymore after suffering a loss like that. Jumping all the way up to number 4, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here on my list. Baker Mayfield is sensational. There's no doubt he's a franchise quarterback. Now you can start talking about him being a true top 10 quarterback. 3 game-winning drives in 3 games for Baker. It's a fine defense. You have some question marks there. Yeah, they gave up the lead to the Jets. Kind of a fluky thing, though. Blocked field goal, return for a touchdown, which, by the way, the special teams and specifically field goal kicking this week in the NFL, I've never seen a week like that in the NFL in my life here to this point. But Tampa Bay, tremendous. Ibuka looks like the pick of the draft, right? Looks like the odds-on favorite here at this point to win the Rookie of the Year, especially with Cam Ward kind of, he's shown flashes, but there, hasn't really done anything sensational. And obviously, they haven't won a football game yet either. Ibuka, sensational. Hamstring for Mike Evans, certainly something to monitor. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers without him are certainly not nearly the same caliber of team, but they belong here at number 4. Baker Mayfield's playing tremendous, and they've got some stuff going in the running game with Irving. They're great in the fourth quarter, late in the game. Tampa Bay at number 4 here on this list. And jumping up to number 3, you got the Los Angeles Chargers. Boy, they're impressive. Boy, Jim Harbaugh's impressive. Reed Mouse kind of came on there and said that he might view him as the best coach in the National Football League. I think that is extremely aggressive and, frankly, not true. But another impressive win, right, is kind of a grinded-out type of game, just typical Harbaugh type of game against Sean Payton and the Broncos, low scoring, and they come out on top. Justin Herbert's been sensational. He makes all the right plays. He's now year 2 with having a competent, really, really good head coach. He's playing great football. That defense, they're sticky in coverage. They rush the passer. They create havoc. Jesse Minter quickly becoming one of the best defensive coordinators in the National Football League, and it kind of feels like it's only a matter of time before he's looked at as a potential head coach in this league as well. The Chargers at number 3, they look really, really good. At number 2, the Buffalo Bills. All right, how about them? I've said in the past they're too Josh Allen reliant, but that was an impressive win there on Thursday against the Miami Dolphins. I think a lot of people thought it would be easier than what it was, but the Dolphins, they were playing with their hair on fire, right? Their coach, people talking about his job, their GM, right? Tua obviously getting banged up as well, and they had, all that fire and energy to play with on a short week, and I thought they showed tremendous fight, by the way, in the game, and I think it'd be a mistake if they continue to play like that, if they fire Mike McDaniel, but obviously Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, that offense too much. Ultimately, they handle business and beat the Miami Dolphins, got them at number 2. Josh Allen probably at this point the favorite to win the MVP. And now I had, the Philadelphia Eagles there the first couple of weeks at number 1. A brief week there with Green Bay taking their spot, but they were back at that number 1 spot. It was ugly early for them, but what did they have to do? They had to rely on their quarterback, and for whatever reason, people can't wrap their head around the fact that Jalen Hurts is really, really good at playing quarterback in this league. He's one of the top quarterbacks in this league. They haven't asked him to do much to this point. They needed to ask him to borderline save them in this game against Green Bay. The conversions on 4th down late, the poise, the accuracy, the toughness. He showed it all, as he always does, and Philadelphia picks up an exciting win. That's just the most Philadelphia thing ever, right? To have 2 blocked field goals, return the last one for a touchdown. That's just grittiness. That's toughness. That's Philadelphia Eagle football, and they're in a tremendous spot after proving they can beat one of the best teams in this league, and the Los Angeles Rams, and I've got the Philadelphia Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champions, back at number 1 here on this list. So there's our list, top 10 teams in the National Football League to this point. Let me know what you guys think, obviously, in the comments section of the show here today, what you agree with, what you disagree with, what you would change, who you have at number 1, all of those things. Obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals do not belong on this list. And, I kind of put them on there, after the Jacksonville game, but, after, I think, week 1, I had them on there. With Joe Burrow. But then obviously he gets hurt, and they get blown out against the Minnesota Vikings. Have no business on this list here at this point. Will they eventually make the list again? I don't know. We'll see. That seems, don't know if you should be necessarily optimistic about that. All right, so we talked Bengals. We did my power rankings. Let's talk Cincinnati Reds here on today's show. Big game tonight, right? Obviously, you have Brady Singer taking the mound for the Redlegs against a right-handed starter in the Pittsburgh Pirates. A lot has been made about, who is going to be in the starting lineup for Cincinnati. We'll find out. Typically, I think it's about 1 o'clock Maybe we'll get it here at the end of today's show. We'll see. Lots of decisions that Tito needs to make. And, it's always funny because, everybody bangs on the lineup on opening day, right? Because everybody's tuned in for opening day. Everybody's locked in. And then, obviously, the diehard fans, they'll still pick it apart as we do on Chatterbox Reds and obviously covering the team. We talk about it all the time. But as I alluded to on Off the Bench, you're going to see a different portion of the fan base show back up tonight that hasn't been there since probably opening day, right? There are a lot of us that have been there throughout the whole time. We ride the roller coaster of emotions that is the Cincinnati Reds. We were tapped in, for the Cubs game, obviously, and something I've never done. I'll just be honest with you. I'm a huge Reds fan. I've never turned a Bengals game off to watch the Reds. That's what I did this past weekend with the Reds playing against the Chicago Cubs. And, just everybody, you kind of felt it. You hear people, around the city that were out watching the Bengals game at some of the bars and kind of just you saw what happened there in the first half and your attention shifted to the Cincinnati Reds. And, people in this town, they get in the argument, oh, it's a baseball town, oh, it's a Bengals town. It doesn't matter, right? All right, you got two teams, the Reds and the Bengals. The Reds, of course, were once a very proud franchise, and the Bengals are a team that's forever been trying to get over the hump. They have Super Bowl heartbreak in their past. They've got an elite quarterback now. More heartbreak, right? It's fine to be both, right? There's different towns, throughout professional sports where they have, good baseball teams and good football teams, or good baseball, good football, good basketball teams. Boston, right? Obviously, New England, their dynasty, it was incredible, but they still had the Celtics there, and they still had the Red Sox, who were winning for much of that there as well. So you can be both. I don't think there really is an argument there as it relates to being a baseball town. But the big decision that Tito made and he went public with was that Hunter Greene's not going to get bumped up in the rotation. They're going to keep him exactly where he's at. And that means he's not going to throw tonight. He's going to throw tomorrow against Paul Skeens and the Pirates. And some people have been kind of banging on Tito for that. Obviously, every move and every decision that Tito makes at this point is going to be something that gets dissected and something that gets broken down and probably something that gets attacked there as well. But I don't have an issue with him keeping Greene where he's at. There's a couple of main takeaways as to why. One, Greene's been sensational since he's come back. No reason to mess with it, right? Now, if you're in the playoffs, as you all know, as baseball fans, you're going to have to do some weird stuff to win games. I get that. And it feels like you're in the playoffs right now, right? And candidly, it feels like you have been throughout the past month or so, right? But I don't want to mess with him with the injury history that he has, right? At this point, it feels premature. I get it's do or die time. I get it. But it feels premature to do something like that with Hunter Greene because of the injury. Also, because of what you have in Brady Singer. Right? If you were in a spot as a Cincinnati Reds team where you were in this position, you controlled your own destiny, you finally eclipsed the Mets and got that last, or put yourself in a position to have that last wild card spot, and you were built on offense and pitching was a struggle for you, I have a different approach. Then it's like, oh, we got to figure out whatever the heck we got to do to make sure he is going to be available for game 162 in Milwaukee. But that's not the DNA of your team. That's not the makeup of your team. That's not the philosophy that you've had all season long. All right, your philosophy has been defense and pitching. I probably said that backwards, probably pitching and defense, right? The rotation is the reason you're in this spot, right? And Brady Singer has been sensational for about the majority of the year, but specifically here the last couple of months. He's been really, really good. His ERA is like just above 2 in that span, and he's done a tremendous job. So he's going to go tonight, and I think if you're in a situation, in a do-or-die game, game 162, the final game of the regular season against Milwaukee, and you go with Brady Singer, I think you feel fine about that. Now, if you're in a situation late where it's like, oh, let's throw Greene in to make sure we get this win, that's fine. You can cross that bridge when you get to it. But I think that would have been premature of Tito to make the decision to say, you know what, we need to make sure he's available for game 162. And also, Tito's looking at it like this. They're hot right now, right? And I think, knowing this Reds team, wouldn't surprise me at all if this thing went to game 162 to determine whether or not they're in. But right now, Tito's got to be like, we're trying to have that locked up by then. We're trying to make it so that game isn't a do-or-die game for us. And I think based on the schedule, based on the guys that you have going against the Pirates and what you have early in the series against Milwaukee, I think you're in a position to probably do that, right? I mean, I think if you win, if you go 4-2, I think you're in, right? I don't think that, I mean, obviously, we'll see what happens, but I think you're in if you go 4-2. I think you're in a position where you might only need to win one game in Milwaukee, and you're in. I think that really is a possibility there as well. So we'll see. And I think Tito understands that, and I think he, maybe would have made a different decision if he knew that game 162 they were going to need it. Maybe he makes the move with Hunter, but he feels good about where they're at as far as their rotation is at this point. And we're going to see Hunter Greene tomorrow night against Paul Skeens. Brady Singer gets the ball tonight. So that was kind of the big decision that Tito had to make, and he made it. Now, obviously, the next big decision is what you do with the lineup. Which guys do you put in? Obviously, Tito has loved Austin Hayes throughout the entirety of this year. He trusts him, right? He has the back issue, so we'll see if they put Austin Hayes in the lineup. I personally think it would be a mistake to put him in today. You have a right-handed pitcher going. By the way, you have 3 righties going for Pittsburgh in this series. I'm putting Will Benson out there. I'm starting him. Whether it's left field, whether it's right field, whatever you want to do, put him in left, have Marte play right, that's fine. But I'm going with Will Benson over Austin Hayes as a left-handed bat going against right-handed pitching. That's what I would do. Then the question becomes, what do you do with Sal Stewart? Is he a guy that you work in the lineup, or is he going to be a bench guy, right? I think my take on this whole situation is that you wouldn't be in this spot with an opportunity to make the postseason if you didn't call Sal Stewart up. He's shown some pop. He's come up in big moments, and he's done some good things for you as a baseball team. Does he belong in the lineup tonight? I don't know. Clearly, Tito trusts Gavin Lux. Tonight will feel like a postseason game, especially if people fill up the ballpark. It's going to feel like a postseason game. The Reds have basically been playing in the postseason, as I alluded to, all month, but tonight will 100% feel like a playoff game. And you brought Gavin Lux in here because he's a championship caliber player. He's had success in the postseason. Tito trusts him, and he likes his bat, and he's come up in big moments. Does he have the ability to put the ball over the fence? No. All right? Obviously, that's something that Sal Stewart has. But I think at this point, they're going to put McLean out there at second because it's so pitching defense reliant. McLean's obviously had troubles. Has he come on a little bit, in recent weeks? Sure. But they need him out there for his defense, and Gavin Lux has proven that he is a liability defensively at second base. So we'll see. Tito's got lots of decisions to make. Personally, I'm putting Will Benson in this lineup. I think he belongs in the lineup. I think Noelvi Marte has proven that he deserves a spot in this lineup, obviously, with how he's swung the bat. Do you have some concerns about him out there in the field? That was kind of always the point, right? He's got some reps under his belt, but at some point was there going to be a game that costed you when it mattered the most with Noelvi Marte's defense in the outfield, because he obviously is making that switch here relatively recently. We'll see. But I think you got to throw him out there. Steer, obviously, in the lineup. He's got to be at first base, right? I don't know. What are you going to do? Put Stewart at first? No, just Spencer Steer at first base. Right, let him hit, put him right there in the middle of your order, let him stay hot. All right, Spencer Steer is a guy that is clutch, incredibly clutch. Spencer Steer has been, my favorite player for a couple of years now since he's been here, to be honest with you. Obviously, the beginning of this year was brutal, where he literally wasn't doing anything, didn't get many, ABs in spring training, what have you. It was a slow start. You look at the average, what is he around now, like 240? That's not good enough. It needs to be better. But he's carried the offense here. He's carried the load for this team over the past couple of games, past couple of series. He has the ability to do that, and need him there in the middle of your lineup and need him there at first base. To me, that's non-negotiable. Miguel Andujar is a guy where that's a very interesting decision to me, because Miguel Andujar, you're not in this spot without Miguel Andujar. You're not. That's a move that, people love picking on Nick Krall, and a lot of it he deserves. But that Miguel Andujar move, genius. Absolutely genius move getting him on this ball club. And we'll see what do you do with him. Obviously, against lefties, he's in. But it's 3 righties here for Pittsburgh in the series. Do you put him in at the DH? You taking Gavin Lux out? I don't know. Tito loves Gavin Lux, but Andujar's batting what this year? 350? Something absurd. I think Andujar might belong in the lineup. As Trace alluded to on off the bench, there was a period there where it was like, we need you against righties, we'll throw you in there now. I kind of feel like maybe in this spot I'm putting them in against a righty. We'll see. I don't know. I don't have the numbers in front of me here at this point, but I feel pretty good about Miguel Andujar, and he's a big reason you're in this spot. So lots of decisions to be made for Tito, lots that needs to be dissected. The big decision, holding off on Hunter Greene, I think it's the right call. We'll see what Pittsburgh does with Skeens. They've been protecting him of late. Obviously, Pirates have nothing to play for here at this point. They've only been letting him go a few innings. Do they let him go longer here against Hunter Greene in a big-time matchup where you're trying to keep the Reds out of the playoffs? I think Paul Skeens is going to be saying, yes, leave me in. I want to go. I want to go toe-to-toe with Hunter Greene and prove I'm the best pitcher in the league. I mean, the way Hunter Greene's been throwing, that you could say those are the two best pitchers in the National League going tomorrow night at GABP in a playoff type situation, which is absolutely electric. But the Reds might catch a break if the Pirates continue to protect him as they've done in the past. Only give him a couple of innings. Then you're just trying to survive the storm through the first couple. Hope Hunter can put you in a spot where he produces well early in the game, and then you go attack the Pirates bullpen. But obviously you hope you're dealing with all that with a 1-0 series lead. That begins tonight with Brady Singer. Lots to dissect, lots to watch, lots to tap into, and certainly is very exciting. We'll talk about it all week here at the show, and hopefully we're talking about a Reds win tomorrow morning back here on the show tomorrow. Again, lineup not out just yet, but that'll be coming here shortly, and I'm sure we'll all have plenty of thoughts and opinions on that when the time comes. All right, got a couple of minutes left here. We'll kind of combine these real quickly into one, and maybe we'll spend a little bit longer talking about them as we progress later into the week. But New York, the Giants, obviously, it's a New York team. They get talked about a lot, whatever. They bring Russell Wilson in this year in free agency. I think they were in a spot there where they kind of wanted Aaron Rodgers, and then he kind of showed that he'd rather, obviously go to Pittsburgh. And then Russell was a guy that was like, well, we don't want to be, caught with our hands behind our back here. Let's go get Russell Wilson. They bring him in. Look, he had a great run in Seattle. He's been cooked for a while. He's been washed for a while, I think, in my opinion. It's just kind of the reality here. Did he have some fine moments in Pittsburgh last year? Sure. But this year to this point has been a disaster for Russell Wilson. And I think it's time for them to move to Jackson Dart as their quarterback. You saw Dable throw him out there for a couple of snaps against Kansas City. And then, they put Russ back in. The crowd was booing. You got to figure out what you have in Jackson Dart. And if you're Brian Daboll, you got to try to save your job. And I don't think Russell Wilson's going to save your job, especially after starting the season 0-3. All right, but if you prove you can be competent with Jackson Dart, obviously Dart's your guy, the guy you picked along with Joe Shane and that regime in New York. I think it's time to see what he can have, what he can do. He's got that moxie. He's got that swag about him, right? Obviously, he played SEC football. He played a lot of football. I think some of the stuff he did in college, actually, believe it or not, will translate to what Brian Daboll wants to do in New York. Obviously, he played for Lane Kiffin. That's not anything like a professional football offense. I understand that. But he's got accuracy. He's got arm strength. He's got toughness. And more than anything, I think the team responds to him. Just even when you see him on the sideline interacting with guys, I think they understand it's only a matter of time before he's the guy in New York and a guy that they can rally around. I don't know if Russell Wilson has that. I don't know if he has ever had that, to be quite frank with you. Even when he was in Seattle, you hear all the stories about him, didn't have any of his teammates at his wedding, right? Just kind of weird stuff there with Russell Wilson when it came to his leadership. And, obviously people have kind of, stabbed his back a little bit as he's left different places, what have you. I don't know. I just think it's time to make the move to Jackson Dart and see what they have in him. Because to me, he's the perfect guy for New York. In this quarterback draft, Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, Shedeur, it wasn't a loaded draft. Certainly nothing like the previous year when you had, May and Daniels and Caleb Williams all come out. Penix as well. Bo Nix, my goodness. Just absolutely loaded that previous year. Obviously, this year was nothing like that, but I view Jackson Dart as a guy that can be a starter in this league. We'll see. But I think it's time to make the switch if the New York Giants. And then coupling it with our last topic here today, the Baltimore Ravens. Very interesting what has transpired with the Ravens over the past couple of weeks. I viewed them as a lock to win the AFC North. I still think they're win the AFC North. I thought they were going to be a threat in the playoffs, and it was just a matter if they could get over that hump and beat Kansas City and or Buffalo in the postseason to kind of get to where they want to as far as getting to a Super Bowl. But they're 1-2. They've given up a ton of points and bad turnovers. I don't know. This team is too well constructed and is too well coached to be in a position where they're losing games like this. Both the games against Detroit and obviously the Buffalo game, they were up big. Both games they should have won, and they weren't able to capitalize and weren't able to execute. So that gives the Bengals life as it relates to the division. I predicted that 3 teams in the AFC North would make the division or make the playoffs prior to the season. We'll see if that happens. Don't feel great about that through 3 weeks. But the fact that you are tied with Pittsburgh for the top of the division, you're just in a spot here where you're just scratching and clawing, right? Finding a way to try to stay alive. And if Baltimore's not going to go on some crazy run where they're winning a ton of games and kind of wrap up the division by the time we get to the end of October, if that's not going to be the case, you can stay in this thing, longer than you expect. And that kind of ties back into what I was talking about with Cincinnati earlier. They're going to respond, and they're going to play hard and physical football on Monday. They have to. right? Because they're tied atop of the division. It's not like they're 0-3. Oh, without Joe Burrow, we're 0-3. The Ravens are 3-0. We're in shambles. No, you're tied with Pittsburgh atop. You have a lead over Baltimore in the division. If you can just claw, fight, scratch, find a way to put yourself in a spot where Joe Burrow could potentially return, you could be in a spot where you can make some noise late in the season. But we'll see. Obviously, the glass half full, glass half empty look at that would be, well, you should be 0-3. You got lucky with the missed kicks and you got a lucky PI call against Jacksonville. Fine, but you got really unlucky last year and the year before. It's time you got a little bit lucky, and you've gotten lucky here to this point. Your record's 2-1. Yeah, you got blown out of the stadium, obviously, against Minnesota, but you're in a position here going forward where you could become 3-1 and pick up a big win against the Denver Bronco team, which offensively not playing as well as I think many people anticipated coming into the season. But that'll do it here for today's edition of the Stone Shield Show. Appreciate everybody, as always, for tuning in. The podcast will be up later. Certainly appreciate that. We're live every day, 11 to noon. Got the intro video fixed there on our the YouTube side of things there. 11 to noon, weekdays. No show Friday. TBD, if we're actually going to have a show. I will not be here. I threw it up to Casey McAllister. If he wants to host, he is welcome to do that. He said, let me think about that. Don't want to put too much pressure on him. Obviously, he does not have to do that, but that is an opportunity that he can take if he wants it. So stand by on that front as it relates to whether or not there will be a show on Friday. There still will be an Off the Bench. That is the plan on Friday, but we still have 2 more editions of the Stone Shield Show here on Wednesday and Thursday with me hosting. And Ryder Cup this week. I saw some people in the comment section kind of fired up about that. We will do a segment on the Ryder Cup. I absolutely am fired up about that myself. We will talk Ryder Cup here on the show, whether that be Wednesday or Thursday. We will see. Plenty of Cincinnati Reds stuff as well. And then we also had to get to some college football stuff, as the weekend, this weekend in college football is the best one of the year to this point, and probably when we look back at it at the end of the year, will probably be the best year as well. So lots of at stake when it relates to college football. So plenty to talk about throughout the rest of the week. Be on the lookout for the podcast, and be on the lookout, obviously, for clips on social media and on the YouTube page as well. Give me a follow on Twitter at StoneShields_. Give the show a follow as well at The Stone Shields. But that'll do it for this edition of the Stone Shield Show, and we'll talk to you tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock.